Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development and your host of Sales and Cigars. So today's sort of a special episode for me personally. It's our 100th episode. We've reached 100 episodes that we've recorded over the last couple of years. I think it's an achievement in the sense that I've had the tenacity and the resources to keep going. And the reason I've done that is because I think we're actually helping salespeople or sales managers and CEOs of small to mid-sized companies. And I started this little adventure for two reasons. One, because I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have fun talking to interesting people and learn. And the other reason was to actually help add value to the community. And so today I'm excited because of the 100th episode, and I have Dave Kurlan from Objective Management Group and Dave Kurlan from Kurlan and Associates. So Dave's one of the super smart guys in our space. Objective Management Group is just full of data and science and gives us these tools that allow us to elevate and help sales organizations elevate. So, and he's the brainchild behind that. And then he has his own sales and consulting and development business. He's been around the block, and as you'll learn, 4 times in the episode. So just get ready for a super entertaining, fun episode of Sales and Cigars. So go grab a cocktail, go grab a cigar, and strap in for another episode of Sales and Cigars. Thanks. So, Dave, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule to jump on the podcast with me. Thank you.
Are you kidding? An opportunity to be on your podcast? I'd walk through walls for that, Walter.
Wow,
And
generous.
watch you smoking a cigar while we talk to each other? What could be cooler than that?
Well, I set up my life so I can have a good time, and my office is my cigar lounge as well. So I'm 65 steps from the back of my house. It's a long commute every day. And I get to have cigars without anybody yelling at me.
What could be better than that?
Cocktail and a cigar, which is a little early in the afternoon for me to do that. So
We could go to the time machine and push the clock forward.
Yeah, it could. But I do have a meeting this afternoon that I want to be coherent for and sound smart. So I don't need any disadvantages, and alcohol would give me that. So
I understand.
So what I was hoping to kind of cover is a little bit about your philosophies. You've been around the block a couple of times.
Probably 4.
4 times. All right.
Yeah.
And you have some strong opinions about salespeople and sales managers. And one of the things that I'm interested in is helping sales managers get better. And because I've been promoted to sales management in my career, and the first time I thought it was a great honor, and I was excited till I got in the car. Happened at a Christmas party, and I got in the car on the way home. My wife asked me, "Have you ever managed anyone before?" I'm like, "No." What does that have to do with anything? She goes, "Well, you're going to have to manage 10 people, and you have a hard time just managing yourself. So how's that?" So she kind of like just made me crash and burn. But my attitude is I had to figure it out and really make it work. And I don't think most sales managers think about that. So kind of tee it up like that. But what do you think that sales managers, what are they missing mindset wise? Let's start with what's going on between their ears.
I think that's a great question. I think, at 30,000 feet, they don't know what the difference is between being a salesperson, a producer, and being a manager, because managing has been demonstrated to them poorly for their entire career. So from what they've seen of sales managers, that's someone who asks what they're up to, asks how it went, collects call reports, delivers updates, helps with pricing, and on a big deal comes in and helps get the deal closed. And in reality, none of that is sales management. That's kind of salesperson with some supervisory responsibilities. So I think from a between the ears standpoint, they don't really know what sales management is. So it's pretty difficult for us to expect them to perform any differently in the role if it's never been clearly laid out to them what the role really is.
They have no mentors to fall back on. God forbid they read a book at some point in their life to understand what they might consider learning. Um,
Of course, most of the
so
books are on sales, not sales management or sales leadership.
Jordan's got a couple of books. There's a couple of books out there that would be
There are,
helpful. Even baseline selling would give them a process to use to follow, right?
right?
Um, which is important. But it's ignorance of the job. It's not their fault, right? Because nobody ever told them how to do it. So we can look at the senior executive, the CEO, the president, the VP of sales, who put them in that role by thinking, well, they know how to sell, so they should be able to manage the rest of these knuckleheads.
Yeah, and we'd like
Um,
to grow it organically. We don't want to bring somebody in from the outside. And the senior manager or the CEO who put them in that role doesn't know any more than the sales manager what is expected from that role.
right.
So they just
And
expect the sales manager is going to do what they do and report up some pertinent information.
so there's hope involved,
A
right?
lot.
Everybody's hoping somebody figures it out.
Yes.
Um, so is there, I mean, do you have an approach? So, I mean, you have two roles. Well, you have more than two roles. We have two companies. So when you're in the consulting hat, right, when you're working with a client and working with a sales manager, I know it's not one of your favorite things to do, but when you do, what's your approach from that 30,000 foot level? Is it, do you start with the sales DNA, or do you go to competencies, or you back up and go to systems? Where do you go?
It's a great question. I think in order to get sales manager buy in, it's important to start with sales process because that's something we can collaborate on. That's something we can marry what they've been doing to best practices and come out with uh, a mashup of what they've done and what they need to do that they can say, yeah, that's an improvement. And we can build a scorecard together. And, so they've got some ownership of both outcomes. So once we're
Hmm.
collaborating and working together, the second place I like to go is coaching. I want them to understand what it really means to coach salespeople and how to determine if they've had an impact on that salesperson. I mean, if the salesperson doesn't walk away from being coached and say, that was freaking awesome. I learned more in the last 30 minutes than I've learned in the last 30 weeks. When can
Mm.
we do it again? If a salesperson isn't experiencing that for an outcome and the sales manager isn't getting that feedback, then they're not coaching effectively. And they need to understand that it's not their job to come in and save the day and close the business. It's their job to get the salespeople to the point that they can do it themselves and do it consistently and do it effectively. And it's their job to basically replace themselves by developing salespeople who are capable of doing their job, which means they have to get
Yeah.
their ego out of the way. So once they buy in conceptually to what coaching is and what the outcomes need to be, then the next step would be to show them how to do that effective coaching, which is basically about teaching them how to do pre-call strategy and post-call
Hmm.
debriefs using role play. And
So
once
the role play has become key in the idea for them understanding what coaching is, not what they think it is.
exactly. Once they've heard a few examples of this is how you coach a salesperson. This is what a good coaching conversation sounds like. This is an example of a good coaching outcome. Once they've heard a few of those, then the light bulbs start to go off. Then you get some, oh, and then you can start to work on them. Once you've collaborated and gotten them to buy in and talked about the possibilities of what it could be and how much better their salespeople could be and how much of an impact they could have on those salespeople. Once they're there, then you can start working on them as people and working on their sales DNA and coaching them up.
Yeah. So this is a difficult question to answer, but I'd love if you could take a swing at it. When
Are we talking
is that
baseball, man?
process? Well, you could take a
Swing.
baseball swing at it. Yeah. Um, I forgot who I was talking to for a second. Um, the idea of how long should that take, right? When as a development guy, a sales improvement person, that somebody is coaching sales managers, like that can take 3 days, 3 hours, 3 months, never. Like, what do you? Because some people just aren't going to get it, right? They should just go back to a producer role.
Yeah.
Um,
If you've got an audience of sales managers that can't leave the room or can't leave the computer for 3 days, and they have no choice but to engage with you, you can do that in 3 days. You can get them from I don't give a damn to okay, I'll listen to okay, maybe you've got something that I don't know to actually this is pretty good to hey, this makes a lot of sense to I've bought in, I embrace
Maybe I
it,
should
I'm
try this.
internalizing it, I own it, I'll do it. Maybe you can get that to happen in 3 days, but 3 months is more realistic. And
And
that's what, and it's only at that point that you can start to coach them up.
so we shouldn't expect, unless you get that intensive experience, we shouldn't expect them to ramp super fast. We shouldn't expect them to tell them something once. It's more like salespeople and children, right? We got to repeat ourselves multiple
Repetition.
times.
Yeah, and look at the big challenge. Um, if we're going to teach them to coach salespeople, which is mostly teaching them to listen and ask questions and have a
Mm-hmm.
good discovery conversation to uncover some compelling reasons as to why they buy whatever is being sold and to create some urgency. We have to assume going into that that even the sales managers don't have that skill. And we know that's the toughest set of skills to teach and the
Mm-hmm.
toughest set of skills to be able to execute well. So it's one thing to get them to be able to sell that way, and another to be able to get them to teach other people to sell that way, and then a third to embrace role playing as a tool. So
Yeah,
it's hard.
getting the role playing piece, I think, is the most powerful aspect of, aside from questions, right? Asking questions, but that role playing piece, I think, is the most powerful way to coach somebody up and being able to flip roles back and forth in the moment from a real situation. But so many people are uncomfortable with that mirror being held up because they think it's a gotcha moment, or
Mhm.
they think it's a so is there advice for the audience from somebody like yourself, with your been around the block 4 times, that
Good memory.
we that we uh, that we can use to help them realize that that uncomfortableness is where we're going to grow? How do we get them to see that, and how do we get that sales manager to help the salespeople who are going to be really resistant to that uncomfortable role playing situation, unless you make a
That's the
game of
million
it?
dollar question. OMG's data shows that only 18% of all sales managers should even be in sales management,
Yes.
and only 7% are any good at what we're talking about right now, which is coaching the right way and the right amount at the right times for the right reasons. So we're to be realistic about this and not pie in the sky. We have to be thinking in terms of we're only going to be able to get one, maybe two out of five people to do this.
Yeah. And we have to reset our expectations of that team if we don't have that level of coaching, because that's 50-60% of what a sales manager should be doing, is
Right. It's
coaching in some capacity.
yeah, it's so easy for people like us, sales development experts, to feel like we're constantly failing with sales managers because 3 out of 5 aren't getting it. 3 out of 5 can't do it. 3 out of 5 choose not to do it. 3 out of 5 don't want to spend their time coaching. they'd rather sell and get the bigger commission than
Right.
coach and get the smaller commission. So even the way sales managers are compensated plays into them not spending enough time coaching and not having an incentive to coach.
Well, and that's a whole nother kettle of fish, if you will, about getting them compensated in alignment with what we want them to really do. Same thing with salespeople, right? There's not always alignment. I mean, I had a client last quarter. They were paying people based on the number of proposals that they did. And I'm like, what does it cost you to create a proposal? And he's like, I don't know. I was like, well, why don't we figure that out? Right. So it turns out it was almost $1,000 for them to create a proposal. And they were paying people $250 to create proposals
And
and
what was
give
their
them
win rate?
27%.
I'm
Which,
surprised it's even that. I
yeah,
don't
I was surprised it was that high.
surprised it isn't lower.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I'm surprised it was that high, but he was like, well, he's like, well, that's how else are we going to get them to do proposals? Like, that's not the goal. You don't make money on proposals. We don't want to put crap into our pipeline. We got to put a scorecard in the front end of this, and we got to get a scorecard when we, right? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, but we need. Why do we need two scorecards? Like, because we don't want our pipeline to be full of crap, and then we don't want to be giving proposals out to our competitors just for the sake of giving somebody a proposal.
Yeah, and in
Um,
a scenario like that, if you could reduce the number of proposals they're making by 50% and
mhm.
then make sure you can win the other 50%, probably raise your closing percentage from 27% to 72%.
Yeah, just because
For
we're
magic.
working, we're more qualified prospects. We're not wasting time. We can be more efficient and more effective. Um, but these are things that are uncommon even at the C-suite level. They
Mhm.
don't. This was a super smart guy. He was an engineer. He had sales experience, and he thought he was. It was a tough conversation to help him see that he was just pissing money out the window by paying people to do the wrong things. Um, so I'd like to transition a little bit to
If that's the way you feel.
discovery. It is. Um, you said something at one of the first conferences that I attended that has stuck with me. Um, that we need to be mentally tough, right? As salespeople, as sales consultants, and that's one of the things that is I've strived to do is become more mentally tough. But the phrase that you talked about, and you said this to what 200 really smart OMG partners that were most of them pretty smart. Um, that if you lose an opportunity that that was qualified that you could have won, you did a shitty job of discovery. Does that sound vaguely familiar?
Vaguely. Yeah, but the gist is there, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember you saying you did a shitty job of discovery, which that's what stuck with me because it was like, wow, he's like seriously talking to a group of people and pointing the finger back at like we don't do a good job. So when I look at an opportunity that I think I should have won and that I didn't, did I qualify it? Did I do a good job, putting it into the pipeline? And then did I do a good job of finding the compelling reasons to, create urgency? Did I do all the good things in discovery? And when I don't win, you were right. I did a shitty job of discovery. So one, I wanted to kind of point out that you were right once again, and you said something that stuck with somebody in the audience. Like must have been 4 or 5 years ago. Um, but can we talk a little bit about the elements of discovery as we round the bases in
Sure,
baseball?
sure.
Um, and one of the questions that I get a lot when I talk about baseline selling, and you can kind of help explain that, but getting to first base, right? They sort of understand that, but they don't understand that qualifying piece, right? What do they need to say to be able to get to first base? Is there a difference between a walk and a, you know, and a shot over the shortstop's head where they get a hit? Can you talk a little bit about that to help actually help me and help the audience understand baseline selling a
Sure.
little bit?
Let's put some context around getting to first, which is a first meeting for an
Yes.
opportunity, right? So in baseball terms, let's say we've got a team of BDRs making appointments for us, and they
Okay.
got us first base. We had nothing to do with it. That's a free pass. That's a walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's say that we weren't very good on the phone. The messaging wasn't very good. We didn't make much of a connection, but for some reason, the prospect on the other end agreed to a meeting. That was an error. We reached on an error. But we had a nice line drive over the shortstop into left field, meaning we had a good, concise call with good messaging, and we identified some problem that they had that we could help with, and they want the help. So we singled. We got a hit, and now
Mm-hmm.
we're on first base.
So I'm going to speak to one of my members of the audience, Tony. That
Hey,
is the
Tony.
best explanation you're going to get for understanding the three different ways to get to first base from the man himself. I appreciate that. So to get from first base to second base, the context is to well, I'm going to let you explain that, right? To do that first part of discovery. Um, there's one piece that kind of trips people up with the SOB quality, but I have a way of explaining that. But I'd like to. Can you walk our folks through that discovery process from
Sure.
running from first to second?
Yeah.
Not
So
stealing.
there's a handful of milestones that need to be achieved between first base and second base, with second base being that place where you go, I've got a pretty good opportunity here. It's not qualified yet, but it's a good opportunity. So obviously they have to need what we have. And if they don't know they need what we have to establish or create a need.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that by asking questions and listening to their answers and following up with more questions and digging a little deeper until we've identified problems, the reasons for those problems, the consequences of those problems, how those problems affect them personally, what it's costing them. And while we're doing that, we also need to establish our credibility. So those problems and the consequences and the cost, that would be a compelling reason to buy. Now, we
Yep.
also need to uncover some information or unhappiness or dissatisfaction with whoever they're buying from today, and anybody else who might be talking to them. And then we get our compelling reason to buy whatever that is from us. So now we have compelling reasons. We've got some monetization or quantification of the cost
Mm-hmm.
of the problem. And while we're doing it, we want to establish credibility, which I call SOB quality. Now, these three things aren't linear milestones. They all happen between first and second base. And you start by having the conversation to get to compelling reasons, but you really accomplish all three at the same time. So, a word on SOB quality, which is a baseball acronym for speed on the bases. You want me to explain all that?
Well, let me take a swing at that, and you correct me. But it's getting that buyer's attention, that they're paying more attention to you than somebody else because of that credibility that you've created. And we create that credibility by the quality of the questions that we ask, and that we get them to think differently about their problem in a way that nobody else has made them think that this problem could affect me differently than they had thought about. It could ultimately cost me a job, or it could cost me a promotion, cost me a bonus, right? Whatever that is. And we're really just weaving this story together. It's not linear, like you said, but we have to just kind of go where we need to go because it's literally a conversation that goes where it needs to go to solve the problem. Is that kind of close?
That's very close. The only part you left out was the baseball part.
Okay. I'll leave that to the baseball guy.
Okay. So you get a really speedy runner on first base, and the pitcher's going to start making pickoff throws to first, one after another, because everybody knows the guy's going to try and steal second. So maybe he can knock a foot off the lead, tire him out, catch him leaning the wrong way. But what's really happening here is that the pitcher is paying more attention to the runner than to the batter. That's how a base stealer disrupts the game, by getting the pitcher to pay more attention to him. So if we apply that same concept to selling, we have SOB quality, we have speed on the bases when we get our prospect to pay more attention to us than anybody else.
Awesome. So the when I'm talking to someone about baseline selling, because that's what the process is that we get them to collaboratively agree to use, um, to be more effective, especially when they don't have a process. They've just been flying by the seat of their pants for the last 10 years. And I help them see that they've been riding around in assless chaps for the last 10 years. And that if we put a little process in place, we'll grow business. What's the number? 15 to 18% just by having a quality, uh, staged, milestone centric sales process that they actually follow
Right.
and they actually teach, right? Not just to have it, but we got to use it.
Yep. Because
Um,
then you get repeatable, consistent results.
and the other thing that I think I've learned from you is that they're building a language on how to talk about deals, where they are, what did we miss? Do we have to go back? Did we go too far? Did we try to steal something and we need to run back before we get thrown out? I mean,
That's where having the visual comes in really handy.
yeah, we always start with that. And sometimes people are like, I haven't run into anyone that doesn't understand baseball. I don't do a lot of foreign operations,
Well,
so
interestingly, I've trained a lot of Europeans, and even though they know cricket and European football, soccer, um, and they don't know baseball, they have no problem catching on. With the visuals, it just makes perfect sense to them. And we're
yeah.
not really teaching baseball; we're teaching selling with a visual metaphor of a baseball
Just
diamond. So they get that really easily. They just
I think one of the most powerful parts of that
mispronounce
metaphor
the
is that
bases. They use
to
cricket terms:
score
base one, base
legally
two,
in baseball,
base
we
three, home base.
yeah, where we can't run across the pitcher's mound to get to third base, and that's what I don't know. Is it 90% of salespeople just go right into the pitch mode? And um, no, it's 93%. No, 80%. What's the right number, Dave?
It
Must,
changes, as we become more effective training more people to sell the right way. That number does come down. So I don't know what it is today, but at some point it was as high as 91%. um, I think it's in the 70s now.
okay. All right. So I was close. So let's talk about how using a process like baseline selling or something similar, how it is agnostic to an industry, a market segment, that it's applicable with minor changes and additional elements collaboratively created. When you're speaking to a client and you have those conversations with salespeople and they say that doesn't work in our business or we're different, you probably heard that once or twice.
Four
Um,
times, once for each time around the block.
so, how do we get them to see that it's a simple process that works across the board? With other than like a transactional, like I need five more boxes of Twinkies, um, it's which isn't complex. How do you get them to shift their mindset, right? Because we're coming back to their mindset that this will apply to them. Is that a
Well, that's
fight?
It can be a fight if we're in a fighting mood, but Saturday nights for fighting, according to Elton John, and we don't do any training on Saturday nights. So it's probably
Hmm.
not a fight. It's probably a give them time to let it sink in. Give them time to recognize that this makes sense. Give them time to do it their way one more time, screw it up, so we can say, see what you missed. You didn't cover this. You didn't cover this. You didn't ask about that. You didn't get a commitment for that. And as they see everybody else embracing it, they don't want to be left behind. So eventually they'll embrace it. But
It's
why?
also for the people. So patience, right, is a virtue that the sales managers need, VPs of sales need, people that do consultation to sales organizations. We need more patience than. Um,
Patience is good to a point. Yeah, it's kind of a balance between patience and impatience.
but eventually, when somebody just they make a decision to not participate in the way that everybody else is, the train has left the station, and they're kind of standing on the platform waving. I look at it as they've made a decision not to play. It's not us. They've decided not to do it, so they can go find another position, go find another place where they can operate the way they're comfortable. Um, do you, but sometimes that's a hard pill for a business owner, the VP of sales to swallow,
Well, think
losing
about
somebody.
who the likely people are to behave that way. It's usually not the people who are failing. It's usually the people who are doing really well and they think they're special and they have a huge ego and they're doing well compared to everybody else. And when everybody else starts doing well, and they're not, then they're not special anymore. And then the CEO doesn't care about losing that person so much because now instead of one person doing well who's a pain in the ass, um, they've got six people doing that well, and the one no longer matters. So if he doesn't want to play, bye bye, see you later. We'll get somebody who does want to. It's like the scene in Coach Carter, the opening scene, where he's trying to get his high school basketball players to sign contracts. And he's basically saying, you're going to sit in the front row and you need a GPA of this much or better. And the top scorers go, screw that, I'm leaving, here's your contract, let me know when your contract's got money. And then one of the kids who doesn't walk out the door says, we just lost our top two scorers. And Coach Carter says, then we'll have new top scorers.
Mm-hmm. It, but that takes, especially in that scene, in that movie, in that situation, takes guts, patience, but it also takes guts, and that's not something that I think is prevalent in the VP of sales seat in most companies.
Right.
They're they're afraid to do that, and they lack the gumption to be able to
You know
push
what the
those
problem
people.
is? We started by talking about sales managers who don't think like sales managers. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're talking about sales leaders who don't think like sales leaders. They're still thinking like sales managers. It's tactical, it's in the moment, it's knee jerk reactions, where a sales leader needs to be strategic
Strategic.
and thoughtful and no knee jerk reactions.
And make sure there's alignment with the business strategy and the sales strategy, and the tactics
Exactly.
are
Well, you
executed.
puff, I'll sip.
I, I I think that there's the principle that we see in education a lot, where you can't teach, so they make you assistant principal, and you can't do that, then they make you principal, and if you suck at all those things, eventually become superintendent of the school
Yeah,
district.
that happened to the gym teacher in my elementary school. He became the superintendent.
Oh shit, really?
He was the gym teacher. He was my elementary school baseball coach. And next time I knew, he was superintendent of schools for the whole city.
Wow. Wow. The only place that they put people I found to hide is in that um, the counselor position, where they're just go over there. We know you're not competent enough to be a superintendent because you can't talk to people. So just go counsel kids about. Um, I remember mine told me that you shouldn't apply to college. You're never going to get into. I applied to one college. That's how dumb I was. Um, and he's like, "You're not going to get in." I'm like, "Okay." Um, and I scored well enough to get in. I placed out of the freshman English class, and he's like, "I knew you could do it. I was just trying to use reverse psychology on you." I'm like, holy
Uh-huh.
crap! Um,
Unlike my guidance counselor in high school who said, "Who are you?"
That's the other guy. That was his brother. Because our counselors, we had two counselors, and one of them was the older brother, and one of them was the younger brother. Um, and they, yeah, I don't know how we got onto that topic, but
Well, he said, "So what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to apply to the 4 colleges that are local to me." He said, "Okay, which ones?" I said, "This one, this one, this one, and this one." He said, "Sounds like a plan. Let me know if you need any help."
great guidance, great counseling,
Public
right?
schools.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, it's a yeah. Well, that's a whole different topic.
Turned out I
Um,
needed a lot of help.
I had
Still
no
do.
problem getting in, no problem getting in. But then once I got there, it was like, oh, freedom. I don't have to go to class. I can do whatever I want. I was
That
at the
wasn't
top of
my
my class.
problem.
No, what
My
was your
problem
problem?
was, oh, studying. I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. I was a week behind after the first day and a month behind after the first week because at
Hmm.
that time in my life, I did not know how to read and comprehend anything. I
Hmm.
could read the
That,
same freaking thing 8 times and still have no clue what I just read.
but you graduated high school. You did really well. Like that. You just
I
get through.
graduated high school, leave out the part about doing really well, and I made it through 1 semester of college. I was 11th in the class from the bottom,
Well,
0.79.
wow, that's a little worse than mine. I've won a lot of bet. I'm sharing more than I probably should, but I've won a lot of bets in my life. Um, Pick a semester in college, and my first semester was a lower GPA than any one of yours. And everybody's like, I had a 0.12, a 0.17. I'm like, okay, I win. Point 0.333
Man, that was
was
lower
my
than mine.
yes, yes. I got to know this lady who was the head of academic actions. This is where I learned how to sell, Dave. Um, she calls me down to her office. She took special. She's like, "We're not sure you're Michigan material." Like, I'm not sure. I've given you a reason to think that. What do I need to do to make you think I'm a Michigan man? And she's like, an integer would be nice, right? So, so I convinced her to give me another shot. She said, "You need a 2.0 or you're done." Like, okay. So I got a 3.5 the next semester.
That's awesome. That's a great comeback. And if somebody was kind enough to have that conversation with me, which they didn't, I would have said, "What do I have to do to get kicked out?"
That's funny. Yeah, well, I'm not sure why because this is a lady that's ahead of like 40,000 students. She had more than me to deal with, and she just like she saw something she wanted to try to help. And then when I came back to her the second time with a even higher GPA, she's like, "All right, we're done. I never want to see you again." She walked around her big old desk, gave me a hug, and then go away. And I didn't want to see you ever again either. But somehow I convinced her, right? And I really think that's where I started to understand that, you know, falling on your sword, being honest about taking responsibility as an individual. Like I gave her no reason to think I was, because I didn't know what I was doing, right? And nobody showing me a way to study, to be responsible, you know, to I don't know. I had an
Could
eight o'clock classes,
you
and I didn't
you
have to
were a
go.
product of the public schools?
Yeah. Yes. I
Kids
was.
coming out of private schools don't run into that challenge when they get to college. They might get uh, distracted by all the partying and the freedom, but they know how to
Mm.
study. They know how to do the work.
All of my friends from New York that went to Horace Mann or Riverside or Regis, they all worked harder in high school than they did their first 2 years in college because they learned how to study, they learned how to write, they learned how to comprehend. I was setting the bell curve in high school, and then I was setting the bell curve in college, but I was on the other side of it, uh, which is the wrong way to go.
Yeah.
Um, but all right, so let me ask one more question about data and
I like
science.
data.
I know you do, and you're really good about sharing these perspectives and telling a story around it. And so, like, think of Bob, right?
My
The guy
favorite
in your
character.
blogs. Yeah. So you have so much data, and I'm thinking about um, relating what Bob does to Bob's sales manager. Like, do we have? Is there a relationship there in your writing? Is there something there where because Bob's sales manager is allowing Bob to get away with all of his, and we probably should give a little bit more context about Bob, but I'll let you do that. But how does how does Bob's sales manager allow him to be Bob and still hold a job in your?
Great question. So Bob is a character I write about. Bob represents the worst salespeople out there. So when I hear about an incident, an experience, a failure, and I get the information about what really happened, I write a story about it, and whoever it happened to becomes Bob for that episode. And we've done 9 episodes of Bob,
But they're all
and
based on real events.
they're all based on real events. I don't make any of the shit up. I'm just chasing things. And there have been some surprising people who have been Bob. Like some OMG partners have been Bob in a few articles.
Do they
Um,
know?
of course not. One suspected. One called me up and said, "Am I Bob?" Well, this time. This time you were Bob. But you haven't been Bob the other times. Was it really as bad as you wrote? Like, it was worse.
It's funny. I'm
Anyhow,
not going to ask any more questions, but that's funny.
Bob's sales manager um, is is allowing all this because he doesn't know any better himself. He's one of those crappy sales managers who shouldn't be a sales manager. He's one of the 82 percenters that just
Mhm.
doesn't understand sales management. So Bob is making him look bad. Bob's keeping his team from hitting their numbers. Bob um, keeps his forecasts incorrect. But
Mhm.
Bob is probably not a whole lot worse than the other guys on his team and gals on his team. And well, in the spirit of equity and inclusion and diversity, and anybody else who might have been on his team.
That's funny. I'm sorry. um, so,
Can we
is
talk about
there?
that for a minute?
We can because we're. I have a. Yes, we can talk about it. I think putting some context around that would be good. So, you want to talk about it from a sales hiring perspective, or you want to
Yeah,
just talk about? Okay.
yeah. As long as you had me bring it up.
You
So
kind of walked into that. I didn't have to
I,
push
I,
very hard.
I didn't mean to blame you. That was all me. But diversity is great,
Mhm.
and equity is great, and inclusion is great. And when a company wants to build a more diverse sales team, that's awesome. And that's something I can support and you can support. The problem isn't about diversity. The problem is diversity over talent.
Hmm.
So you have to build it for talent, and then hope that you get diversity in that biggest pool of talent. And I see some companies making the mistake of putting diversity ahead of talent, and they end up with a sales team that doesn't work. Here's the example. If you want to hire a bunch of people who are different, that's great. Blue hair, purple hair, green hair, pink hair, I don't care. Tattoos, piercings, fine. Funny looking clothes, okay. Gender identity different from what I might have been brought up with, fine, great. But don't go and put those people in front of bankers.
Right.
Put them on the phone and have them play it as straight as they can and not amplify their differences, because the people on the other end of the phone or the bankers all have their own biases. And if amplifying the diversity takes precedent over use of the talent, they all fail. The whole experiment fails. And if we want to be able to validate the importance of and effectiveness of building a diverse team, then they have to be in roles where we can take advantage of their talent, not lose because of the lack of talent. I'm done.
We have to set them up. No, that's awesome perspective, because if we're setting people up to fail, if we put somebody with, I saw somebody the other day. I mean, I'm just at a store. I got roped into going to a physical store, and I'm just kind of standing in the corner waiting, and my wife and daughter are doing their thing, and this lady comes in, with a complete tattoo on the side of her face that was freaking scary, right? Just, I mean, it was designed to be like a skeleton. It's just on half, not on the whole thing. She might have run out of money. I'm not really sure.
Finish.
Um, might be working on
The
it.
artist left town.
Something ran out of ink. Um, there's too much pain involved.
Supply chain
Whatever.
issue.
But I was sort of taken aback, because it's not something you would normally. We were at a tack shop. My daughter's an equestrian, so we were spending thousands of dollars on helmets and whatnot. And this lady was there, and my afterwards we had a conversation. My daughter was like, sort of like, why are you so offended? I'm like, I'm not offended. Like, I don't care. It just freaked me out because I wasn't expecting it. And how many people that come into that shop are expecting to see that, right? And you can adjust, but don't, give me a second to see that. Just don't pop out of the corner and scare the crap out of me. I think there's an element of us being putting people in spots that, they need to be coached up. It's no different than putting a high producer, quality salesperson into a sales management role that doesn't know how to manage people, can't follow a process, has always just done what he's done with magical powers, and now we're going to ask them to do something that they're not capable of. To me, it's the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we're not being fair to people that, I don't care what the difference is. It doesn't matter to me. I've always looked at it from who's got the best swing, who can move their feet the fastest, right? From I played tennis when I was younger and thinner, and to me, it was about getting your in the position to give yourself the best opportunity to hit the ball, and that meant moving your feet, right? And I don't
Mm-hmm.
care how hard you hit the ball.
Yeah, it was
If you
all
didn't,
about
if you
getting
weren't
in the right position.
and leveraging um, your strength. It doesn't matter if you're. It matters if you're 6'6". It helps you with your serves, but if you're not in the right spot, you're not in the right spot. It's sort of the same to me. It's the same thing. I'm rambling, but um, I think the idea of diversity is great, but let's focus on putting the right people in the right roles for the right reasons, and that's talent, because we're trying to drive revenue, and that's what the job of the sales organization is revenue
And
producing.
and just a quick example. The diversity is out there in the talent pool. I
It
did a,
is.
I did a recruiting project. We had to help a client hire 28 salespeople. Well, actually,
Oh,
3 regional sales managers and 25 salespeople. And they were all territory positions, so all over the country.
mhm.
And the diversity, equity, and inclusion was at the top of the list in the HR department. And I said, if you're going to have us help you with this, we'll find you the talent. It's up to you as to how diverse you want that talent to be. So I remember the beginning of this project because of the first 8 candidates we sent them that checked off all the boxes from a talent, skills, culture, fit standpoint. 4 of them were diversity candidates right off the bat. 4 of the first 8. I had an awesome black lady. I had an LGBTQ Hispanic lady. I had a black guy, and I had a LGBTQ white guy that were all great salespeople and great candidates. And just by focusing on the talent and letting the talent rise to the top, the diversity comes along with it. But when you focus on the diversity, you'll miss out on the talent.
Yeah, and that's a great example that all all of the diversity groups, if I can say it that way, have talent in sales, have talent in all the other functions of an organization. We just need to reach out to them and describe what it is that we're looking for, and not worry about anything. And the process that we teach clients to follow is literally agnostic about, like,
That's right.
don't look at the resumes,
Yep.
out of the box. We're not really looking at, you know, the closest we get to is having a phone conversation with somebody before we actually do an interview. But every of those first 3 or 4 steps, we've
Yeah,
eliminated
we've
most of the
removed
bias.
the bias from the process.
Because um, I had a friend who was in HR at a very large bank, and she would not hire anyone that went to Notre Dame. She
Why?
literally filed circular filed.
Why would you want to hire a Notre Dame grad?
Well, she was a Michigan grad like myself, but I'm like, look, it's a great school. I don't care for them, but it's a great school, and there's smart people that come out of there. How do you, like,
Exactly.
justify that? And that to me is you know uh, a bias. So, Dave,
Absolutely.
yeah, and completely unfair, regardless of DEIA or DEI. Um, so let me wrap this up with a question, Dave. And I really don't know the answer to this. Does Dave Kurlan have a relationship with cigars, past or present?
He does.
Huh?
One of my best friends, Rick Kayer, invites me to play golf with him once, and if I'm lucky, twice a year. And when we get to about the 4th hole, he pulls out his cigars and he hands one to me and he clips and he lights it and he says, "Here you go, Davy." And he watches me turn green until I can't handle it anymore. And then we golf some more. That's my relationship with cigars.
It's not uncommon. That's funny though. So he knows he's wasting a good cigar, or is he giving you? Is he? And this is my selfish perspective. Is he giving you a nice cigar? Or is he giving you one that's been stuck in the corner of the humidor he's been trying to get rid of?
He goes out and gets special cigars when he's going to golf with me. He gets mild cigars, maybe even flavored cigars, like vanilla flavored cigars, hoping that I might be able to better tolerate it because he doesn't want to have to smoke alone.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
don't have
like
that problem.
I like holding it, uh, knocking the ashes off, smelling it. Just struggle a little bit with the smoking part.
You're not inhaling them, are you?
No,
Okay. Yeah, that's
and
cool.
I
That's a
wouldn't
good
be
story.
green. I'd be throwing up.
All right, Dave, I truly appreciate you taking some time. We've spent practically an hour on the phone. I told you a couple of sales guys never going to run short on a conversation. And we went all over the place.
We did.
So I really,
We covered
and we,
everything.
and we probably only offended 3 or 4 people. So that's good. It's a low number for me.
Even lower for me. I get hate mail.
Really?
Yeah. Do you remember the blog post I did a couple months ago on cashless bail?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. But you kind of still danced the line. You kind of still went. You've always kind
I
of.
didn't say I agreed or disagreed with it, and I only wrote a sentence about it just as an analogy for what companies do with salespeople.
Mhm.
Cashless bail, for it or against it. The reality of it is that criminals, alleged criminals, are back on the street right after they commit the crime. Underperforming salespeople, they go before the judge, who is their boss, and the judge says you have to do better next year, and they're released back out into their territory. It's the same. That was the
Yeah.
point I was making. But I
But
got hate mail. Some people only
a
read the
lot, or
"You're an evil fascist asshole."
wow,
I got some nasty stuff on that one. I
wow.
could have
But
thought
you,
of much better articles to write hate mail and hate comments and evil stuff on social media over. Not that one.
yeah, because you're.
There was
I'm
one
trying to.
article where I said I supported Trump. I would have expected all the hate to come in on that one.
But you've actually said, in I'm going to offend some people in a couple of blog posts over the last couple of years,
Mhm.
um, and I didn't realize that you would get the hate mail for that.
Most of the people who hated on it and hated on me didn't read the article. They only read
Headlines.
something about comparing cashless bail to sales performance and decided I must have been one of those people.
You
Evil.
engage with those people, or you just let it go
For the most part, let it go.
every once in a while.
Most
You
of the
engage.
time. Every once
Yeah.
in a while, I engage. Yeah. If they
Okay.
if they piss me off in a certain way, I'm like, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
the last word.
They push the right button,
Yeah.
you come back, and
The
that's what.
button's pretty hard.
That,
The button's pretty hard to find. It's buried pretty good, but if they find it and push it, and I realize they pushed it, I might respond.
yeah, because you're not emotionally engaged in your number is pretty green on that and the sales DNA piece,
Uh-huh.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Um,
My
so
my red number is relationship building.
it's funny. I have that's not a strength of mine. I struggle with. Um, I remember the first event, the training event I went to in your old place, and you're sitting in your chair at the podium doing the thing, and then when there was a break, you talk to the person next to you, look up, Kurlan's gone.
Yep.
So I asked Patterson once. I'm like, where does he hide? Because he's not in his office.
I'm
So
hiding.
I don't know, right? I don't know. So, but I could relate to that. I kind of, and how hard it is to walk around and shake somebody's hand and say hello and know their name. Those are all things that you you develop that skill set and that talent because it's not natural and it's not easy. But
And
and then to
I'm a acute introvert. I mean, somebody watching this interview wouldn't think so. They think, oh, you're dynamic and charismatic, and you're funny, and you're entertaining, and yeah, but that's an act.
Mhm.
I hate people.
Yeah, well, there's a quote that I love. It's a sales is a Broadway show performed by a psychiatrist. That to me is true, right? Because I, I I'm not a big fan of people, and I probably shouldn't say that on Brendan. We might have to cut that out, but I'm not. I'd rather have a conversation with 1 or 2 people rather than be in a room with
Yeah,
50 or the stuff you do on stage. That doesn't interest me at all. Um,
yeah. The stage part doesn't bother me because I'm just doing what I'm paid to do, right? That's a performance. Um, but then when the performance is over and I actually have to talk to people, that's
Because you got
different.
to eventually get through the people out of the stage to get to the door to get out, unless there's
Yeah,
a back door.
I would take it.
All right, Dave, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It was fun,
Let me
just like you promised.